My name's Scott Morris. I'm the water quality coordinator for the Sauk-Suiattle Indian Tribe. So that's up in Darrington, where the reservation's about 5 miles north of Darrington. This locator map kind of shows you the whole watershed, the Skagit watershed. So the Skagit, of course, is the largest watershed in Puget Sound. We still have all five salmon species, wild runs, and from the tribe's perspective, that's where we're coming at. Knotweed is it kills me to see some of these watersheds where you got 10, 15 feet knotweed shading out all the little cedars that are going to be our large woody debris for the tribe's fishery. So about 2011, when there was some additional funding through a Puget Sound partnership that came to tribes, I decided we were already part of the Skagit watershed, or the Skagit Coordinated Watershed Management Area Working Group. And those of you who deal with invasive species know what these watershed working groups, the importance of those type of partnerships. So we were already attending those meetings, but not really, we didn't have funding. So I brought some funding to bear in 2011, and we've been going ever since on that. So anyway, if you look at the where the confluence of the Sauk and the Suiattle is on this map, that's roughly where the reservation is. Darrington's a little farther south of that. The Sauk is the biggest tributary for the Skagit River. The Skagit, of course, is the biggest river in Puget Sound. The original knotweed infestations in the upper Sauk were found 40 river miles upstream at Bedell near the confluence of the North and South Forks in 2002. So that's, if you look where it says North Fork Sauk River, that's the north, and the other fork there's the South Fork. So way upriver, and most of that's Forest Service land, but there's some inholdings there that go way back. And some of those cabins is probably where they brought the knotweed in, and Nature Conservancy jumped on it pretty quickly. So anyway, since then, knotweed has spread downstream all the way to the Skagit River estuary, well over 100 river miles. And down in the Skagit estuary, there's places where it's just, in the middle reach of the Skagit, it's huge. Anecdotally, people in Darrington talked about playing in the bamboo, so maybe it's been longer than 2002, but as far as like in the floodplain and really noticeable, 2002 is kind of the watershed moment for knotweed. So Nature Conservancy and US and the Forest Service did some surveying up there in those reaches. You can see the numbers there. So 2002, they found about 20 patches in a reach from Bedell down to, say, the White Chuck, which is one of the major tributaries on the Sauk. So a handful, really, but not much. The problem was the Forest Service's process. They had to do an environmental assessment if they're going to use glyphosate in the watershed. And what happened in 2003, any of you all that remember our end of the world, Glacier Peak got about 10 inches of rain in an insanely short amount of time. We had a record flood in 2003, like 103,000 CFS down at the downstream gauge. And these 20 patches ballooned. And it also, because the EA took so long for the Forest Service to get done, it was around 2006 they were ready to start spraying. Well, what happened in 2006? Another flood. And so those 20-some patches turned to 208 patches in this same reach. And any of you all, this is a Knotweed Summit. I don't have to tell you how that happened. But it really discouraging. We could have really snuffed this out early on in the upstream reaches. And it's also evidence of why you need to stay. We've got management back down. You see the numbers in 2022. We're back down to 12, back down to 29. We've talked about maybe doing it every other year, and it just makes me nervous doing that. Maybe we'll get it to where we get someday where we can do that and where we concentrate more downstream. But I don't like the idea of skipping a year. I haven't been able to be that brave yet. Since this time, with the coordinated weed management area, the Skagit Coordinated Weed Management Area Working Group was formed. it's a multiple agency partnership, and has really been a success story in the Sauk particular and the upper Skagit. We're now working in the middle Skagit, and that's what you'll see in some of the next slides. But you've maybe seen maps like this. You do the management zones. Tier 1 is called the clean zone, and we do have a clean zone in our wilderness areas. Thank goodness, knock wood. Tier 2 is the eradication zone. Those are the gray areas where we still feel like maybe one day we could eradicate it in those areas. And then tier 3 is the management zone. And I think when this map was done many years ago, you could almost call anything downstream of Rockport on the Skagit the hopeless zone. But as I'm going to show you, I've got a lot more hope than maybe I did once upon a time. So top-down approach, we've all talked about it. I've heard you guys talking already. But of course, you work upper watershed because knotweed, if you put too much, if you try to leapfrog too much, it just comes back. But I'm not going to belabor that. But if anyone has questions, I'll be on a panel later and we can go into some of the pros and cons of leapfrogging. I guess there was one question about that, and the one thing I'll add about that, be strategic with doing that, but don't get too carried away for all the obvious reasons. So this is what progress looks like today after the 2024 field season. My coworker is still working. We have our annual meeting on Monday. He's still crunching the numbers for 2025 desperately back at the office. So I don't have the 2025 data, but this is good enough to give the overall picture. The legend shows that the old patches that are dead are those yellow squares. We have shapes as well as colors because our main data cruncher is colorblind. So keep that in mind. If you have any colorblind folks, it's nice to do shapes as well as colors. And I learned that from Joe. Anyway, the yellow squares are the old patches that we've considered dead. We visit them, say, 3-4 years in a row. I hear the 8 years, we've all seen it come back, but 3 to 4, we're more hopeful that maybe we've killed it by then. Anyway, what you see here is we've been able to move downstream on the Skagit. So the confluence is there at Rockport, the Sauk-Suiattle confluence, and then downstream of that, where the Baker River comes in at Concrete and almost all the way down to Cedro-Woolley now. And really, that only started in 2018. We didn't move downstream of Rockport until additional funding, and also we really got the Sauk to where we're pretty much using hand sprayers. We used backpack sprayers back in the day, and it's rare that we mix a backpack on the Sauk anymore. That's the kind of progress that can happen with persistence. This is what you need to show your funders, these types of stories. You just have to go back every year. We all know that. The hard part is the funders that want it to be over in 3 years. It's just not with this plan. It's the kudzu of the Northwest. But this is pretty, we have days where our crews have trouble finding knotweed on the Sauk. Like they get bored. They're like, are we going to see some? Don't worry, we'll get you some. And now, all those green dots, the green is the new patch sprayed. I think the blue diamonds are also old patches that showed resurgence. So the blue and the green are where we actually treated in 2024. And the yellow squares are we visited and found nothing. So the overall picture you're trying to see here is we're able to move downstream now. Because of the persistence. You see the odd green dots here, but there's, very few in the upper reaches. It's back to manageable here. Now, unfortunately, back in 2013, we used different colors, so I'll coach you through that. But the main thing I want to show here is that, in 2013, so what's that? More than 10 years ago, the lower 4 miles of the Sauk, that's what you're seeing there. And the confluence with the Skagit, the upper part of that photo on your left, is the Skagit River, and where the Sauk runs south to north. So those are the confluence of those rivers. And the reason the Sauk looks so brown is Glacier Peak in the summer is just spewing amazing amounts of sediment in through the Sauk from the volcano as the glaciers are melting. And so you can see the Skagit is very clear, and the Sauk comes in quite murky. But the point with the knotweed is we had a real incubator where that arrow is on the left photo there. There was a cut bank that was just infested with knotweed, and we didn't have landowner access, and we just knew we were getting knotweed constantly coming in. So even though the red dots show success, those are the dead ones. The blue dots show where we had to spray. So we had 100 patches in this lower 4 miles that we just could not, that number could just never come down. And our crew found on the bigger picture here, you see that 4 acres where that arrow is pointing on the left, the bigger patch there, that there was a 4-acre patch of old growth knotweed that our WCC crew found in 2012. And we realized, we knew this was a problem in this area, and we needed to get more landowners on board, but we didn't know the extent of the problem until our crew came back with pictures. It's taking a little time here. Oh, I said that. I had some animations I forgot about. There we go. So there it is. And if you look closely here, our crew kind of gets lost. It's well over their heads. And they came back saying, Scott, we got a problem. And I agreed. This was August, so it's kind of toward the end of their season with us anyway. And we clearly needed a bigger plan before we just go spraying in there. So we came up with a plan, and it was 2 full WCC crews, so 12 people, plus myself. And we took about a day we bent some canes, we bent some pathways through here. I think it took 3 days of actual treatment. And it was a backpack show. And we used the Mazapir, but we were going to max out on our Mazapir, so we used glyphosate closer to the river, and there was a creek or two in that area, so we prioritized. We'll use glyphosate near the water's edge and a Mazapir in the center. We could have used either on it, but it's just we would have maxed out the Mazapir that we could have used because of the permit calculation. It was just massive. But we had a really good kill rate. So here's how we did it. We have the tribe has a 200-gallon water tank, so we used that to mix. We had some people just mixing while people would spray and then come back and spray again. And we had someone keeping constant track of the ounces they sprayed and mixing. And that was just, a whole station of that. And then you can kind of see the pathways they're using to get in on this patch. And then got to watch the hornets. And we also kind of choreographed who's where, so we're not, for safety reasons, obviously. Make sure we only had one person in harm's way at any given time. So after that, so that was in 2013. So here's a before picture earlier that year before the treatment. In May of 2013, you see well over their heads, and it's May, so it's still not even fully grown yet. But that's Sonny Gorman from the Snohomish County, and that's our former field coordinator, Andrew. So we went and took a look. That's the before picture, and here's the after photo. Pretty good kill rate. The Mazapir is amazing. This is May of 2014, so a little bit of resurgence here. There was some, we we held off replanting this site for about 3 years, I think, because of the massacre. Because it stays in the soil. You've heard that earlier. But and that also gave us time to go back with hand sprayers and get the resurgence. And then we had a real issue with policeman's helmet. Came back with a vengeance, but that was a lot easier to deal with. We pulled a lot of that and didn't even spray. But we had good success. We ended up planting this eventually, but I had to hold off our, they were the funders. Why aren't you replanting this? We are replanting it, just not yet. Give us time. And so now what this area looks like is much more managed. Those yellow squares are old patches that are dead. We did not find, they're old patches, we know site, but found no canes. Or if we found canes, they were dead. And then so there's a couple blue diamonds, there's green, where we either old or new patches that we sprayed, but you see the numbers here. For this section, we are back down to in between 1 or 2 dozen patches every year, instead of like around 100, pretty consistently. More than 10 years ago now, every year we're hitting a very manageable. And this is an area that has a lot of side channels and a lot of survey work for hand sprayers. The other thing I want you to notice is we've divided our watershed into sections, where those gold vertical bars are. And we did this because one of the problems you have when you move downstream is you have maybe 3-4 years of nice success where you're using less herbicide and finding less patches. And then you decide you get more funding and you turn the corner at Rockport, and now you've got these old growth patches that are, and so for funders, it looks like, wait a minute, you're not having success. You're fine. It's like, no, this is success. We are moving down in the part of the watershed we're never able to work in before. But it's hard to show that in graphs. Well, if you divide your reaches, now the upstream reaches have a more steady success story you can show. But if you just lump one graph with your whole watershed, you're going to have a weird, every 3 years or however long it takes you to move downstream. This was my approach to trying to tell a more nuanced story of what's actually happening. Trying to show progress in knotweed is one of the biggest struggles we've had over the years. Trying to find the right graph or the right, so this kind of helps. And this is what the spreadsheet looks like. You don't need to look at the numbers, but the main thing is see all the different numbered sections I have for the watershed. And, for the first 10 years, we were only making it to section 8. Although the first 10 years, I didn't even have them divided as sections. It was more several years ago that I figured that part out. But it gives you the idea of, then you have statistics for each reach of the river, and it's a little easier to demonstrate the progress you're making. The other way you can demonstrate progress, this is from our State of the Watersheds report that the Indian Fisheries member tribes put out every 4 years or so. So if you look at gallons of herbicide is kind of a way that people typically mark progress. It's the one kind of steady, if your gallons of herbicide are going down over time, that means you probably have less knotweed that you're spraying. And so we've demonstrated that. If you see like 2014 for the reach between Darrington and Rockport, those dots are the big green dots show that, and these numbers are unmixed. This is the actual herbicide without water. So we were at, I think it says here, that in 2014 it was 2.4 gallons of herbicide for the lower Sauk, or the middle to lower Sauk from Darrington to Rockport. So 2.4 gallons. 10 years later, only 0.3 gallons of herbicide. So that's another classic way that people use for measuring progress. And the other thing that those numbers don't include is, in 2018 at Rockport, we turned the corner and started going down to Skagit. So that's why we don't have any big green dots there. But anyway, that's another way to show progress. I'm going to move through some of these a little quicker because I want to get to the drizzle method. So the upland areas don't often get as much attention, but we realized in Darrington with all the logging equipment and people that there's a riverbank that goes right there. People just shove the knotweed into the river. So it's pretty important to try and get a hold of upland sources as well. And our contacts in town, people on staff, we've been able to make some educational inroads with people. But I wanted to get to this. This is a potential game changer, and I don't know if any of you all are familiar with the drizzle method, but our contractor, one of our private contractors a couple of years ago, had worked with Brenda Clifton at the Skagit River System Cooperative, and he had used what he called the drizzle method on blackberries. And he's like, "Why aren't we doing this on knotweed?" I'm like, "I don't even know what you're talking about. Tell me more, He said, so essentially you're using a different nozzle with a faster flow rate, higher herbicide concentrations, but lower volume per acre. And there it says 48 to 64 ounces per acre. Your spray pattern is much quicker with a far less leaf coverage by the sprayer. So he describes it as almost like a Zorro, you're making a much more quick hand movement. And I've provided a link here, which actually there's a publication that describes the method in more detail than I can do right now. And if you want to email me, my email will be listed at the end, and I can send more information on this or put you in touch with Brenda, who knows this. And the reason it uses splatter and drip to match the coverage. Your traditional method is you want to cover those leaves, right, with a spray. So this is more a concentrated jet that's hitting the leaves and doing the splatter and some drip. But your crew is able to move much quicker and use less herbicide. And our initial results are finding very similar efficiency, very similar kill rates. We're really encouraged by this because for those hopeless old growth patches, your crew can move a lot faster with this method. And so in 2025, I had them in 2024, we just did it experimentally on, a handful of patches. And that's where this efficiency rate, his effectiveness on trial plots was an average of 89% kill rate. So this encouraged us to expand to the middle Skagit in 2025. But of course, we're going to have to get out in the field and see how effective that was on actual real patches. So we see this as, it's only applicable on the very first treatment of very large. You wouldn't do this on, stuff you're doing hand sprayers or even backpack sprayer where it's a manageable thing. But for first attack on big patches, this could move your crew through a lot quicker. So, here's our funding sources. This is the amount of money we had in 2025. That is just Sauk-Suiattle's money. Our partners had other funding as well. And then, so the summary is the multi-agency partnerships, the top-down approach, jump on it early, and don't get discouraged. Large patches can be brought under control, but you just really have to stay with it. So I think, yeah, and there's our partners.